Welcome to Women We Should Know with international speaker, mindset reset mentor, author, and your host, Leslie Michaels. With audacious honesty and candor, the Women We Should Know podcast presents the wisdom and life-empowering insights of women who are the embodiments of innovation and social evolution. Please join Leslie as she shares potent conversations that will inspire your personal and professional evolutions. Welcome to Women We Should Know. Welcome back to Women We Should Know, the podcast where I always have the pleasure and the honor of having conversations with women who are shattering the status quo, breaking down the paradigms, bringing something new to the conversation. And as those of you who have been with me for a while know, my very favorite part about all these women is that they always leave a light on so that we can see where the path is if that's one we want to follow. So welcome back to Women We Should Know, because we have an amazing conversation in store for you. Holly Jackson is a revenue and performance consultant, speaker, and podcast host. Yep, she has her own podcast, so watch out for that. She is an author and founder of Business Builder Throwdown. I love it. Her career spans from technology to communications, as well as organizational change, public relations, and content strategy. Holly has dedicated over a decade to helping business leaders get their groove back physically, mentally, and emotionally. Don't we all need that sometimes? She led a local to global policy initiative to influence future leaders' impact on communities. Now here's a fun fact. Holly also played in Carnegie Hall, first chair clarinet, and she's a black belt in karate. In her peak performance blueprint, she looks at a holistic and logistical approach to success. After all, we can't have massive success in business without a life of equal or greater success. Don't we know that that's true? We've had this conversation, women. Business owners hire Holly to master the art and science of real success because most lack direction, action, and results. So she helps define and design a business roadmap for impactful visibility, intentional profitability, and endless sustainability. What more could you want than that? Except to have a conversation with Holly and pick up some golden nuggets from her today. So without further ado, Holly, welcome to Women We Should Know. I am thrilled to have you with us today.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
I have a little tradition, and that is I love to ask my guests at the onset, what has already inspired you today?
Oh, this is a perfect day to ask that question. So this morning, I'm a rock climber, and I went to the rock climbing gym with some friends, and there's this 5/8 climb, which is probably like medium, not super difficult, but difficult enough. And I wanted to mock lead it, and I'm glad I mock led it, because if I'd led it, it was very scary, and it had this really massive overhang. And so your body's kind of hanging out, your feet could fall off the holds. And luckily I was on top rope, just mock leading it. But even just finishing that climb, because it was so heady, I was on high on endorphins and adrenaline for 2 hours after that climb and enjoyed the rest of my session. I was like, I could take on the day now.
You could take on the world now.
Yeah, that was really empowering and fun and inspiring. So it's a fun way to start the day.
Great. What is a 5/8 climb?
So climbing grades on vertical walls start at 5.5. Anything above a 5.5. So like 5, 6s, and 7s are like beginner level. And then I'd say 8s and 9s are medium level. And then when you get into 10s through 13s, that's really difficult. And so, yeah, it was kind of middle tier, but had this massive overhang, and it was just more heady than difficult physically. So it's pushing the mental game.
I'd have to start at about maybe 3.9, 4.1, something like that. But anyway, that's a different story. Thanks for sharing, and I'm glad you had such an inspiring morning. All of your clients benefit from it the rest of today. I would like to begin, now that we've heard about your great 5/8 climb, with your main focus that relates to women in terms of helping them walk that journey from self-expression to actual empowerment.
Okay. So I have something I call the fear method, and it really works for anything, whether it's fear of public speaking, fear of stepping into who you are. And for many women, stepping into being fully who you are in the workplace can be difficult. So the fear method has 4 steps. The first thing is face it. So acknowledge that the fear is there, the discomfort is there, the being uncomfortable stepping into who you are is there. And then the E in the fear method stands for embrace curiosity. So instead of judging the fear, ignoring it, trying to push it away, try to avoid it, you instead want to bring in curiosity and creativity and kind of put on your scientist experimental hat and get playful with it so that you can have fun with it and get through it. And then the A in the fear method stands for advocate. So then once you're clear on creative solutions, start advocating for what you want and what you need. This could be working with colleagues around you, asking for support from your community, working with a mentor to advocate for your needs. And then the R stands for reach out. So this is reaching out to your community. It could be other women. It could be your mentor. It could be a coach. It could be a family member. So if you use this 4-step approach, really it helps you step into empowerment, face your fears head on, deal with anxiety. It applies to dealing with chronic pain. You can use it for grief. It's a really great, simple process for facing anything and really stepping into the present moment and living to your full potential.
What a great system. I love those kind of systems where you change the context of the word. I want to ask you, because working with women myself, I run into this a lot. How do you address clients, women who are afraid to acknowledge their fear? I find this in women a lot more than men.
Okay, so the first thing is trying to avoid your fear. And for those of you who have seen my TED Talk, you'll know that I'm famous for my bear story. So if you're facing a bear in the woods, you can't ignore that. This applies to all of our modern fears and anxieties as well. So trying to run away from the bear, so to speak, or your fear is a huge disservice to yourself. You're in denial, and it's actually going to show up physically as pain or disease or illness, right? So trying to avoid your fear, eventually you can't outrun the bear. You can't outrun your fear, and it's going to catch up with you. So instead of avoiding it, why not face it? Just like when we grieve, you can't, if you avoid the grieving process, right? It shows up physically as disease. They've scientifically proven this. It shows up as illness or tumor or disease. So, and nobody can go through that process for you. Grief and fear are quite similar in that way. You have to first acknowledge it, bring it into the room with you, and face it head on and walk through that. And nobody can do that for you.
That's great. And when you address women like this, do you find yourself being successful? Do you find a lot of women willing to think, okay, this makes sense, I'll take a little step?
Sometimes there's still resistance. I mean, anything we're trying to do to grow and transform creates discomfort. And so they might take a step forwards and then take 10 steps backwards. And then we take more steps forwards. But I think for the women that have more resistance, and this applies to men too, but if you have a lot of resistance in facing your fears and anxieties, I have to work with those clients on painting the picture of how much pain it's actually causing them. So it's bringing to the surface how much it's holding them back, how much it's actually creating rifts in their relationships, in their sales process, in their business, in how they show up in a sales conversation, in how they network with people, in their friendships, in their parenting. And so when you paint that picture, it's like, well, why wouldn't we fix this? Even if it's really uncomfortable, it's too painful to sit in it and to avoid it any longer.
That's a great approach. Actually getting them to sit in the discomfort and see how much pain it's causing. That's a great approach. Kudos for that one. Now, another thing you mentioned in your fear approach is getting mentorship. This is one of my big soapboxes is women and mentorship. According to the studies from Harvard Business Review that they published last year, 67% of women are resistant to mentorship. And Mary Strutz wrote an amazing book about the missing mentor with women. How do you help women understand that this is a crucial missing support element in their overall business plan, their overall life plan?
Well, I mean, especially if you're working with people who are in the service industry or they're coaches, it's easy to objectively share with somebody else or your client what the problem is, right? Because you have that 10,000 foot view. When you're in it yourself, you can't see it. Just like I coach, I consult, I advise clients, but I mean, my goodness, I definitely have my community, my mastermind, my mentor, my coach, my trusted advisors in business. And honestly, when you're looking for a mentor and a coach, the first question I would ask them is, who is your mentor or coach? Because if they don't have one, they're already digging their grave and not growing. They're not transforming. And quite frankly, I wouldn't want to work with that person as a mentor because they've given up transformation. And this is a lifelong journey. It's not like you suddenly wake up and you have arrived at perfection. Like that does not exist. So I think in terms of explaining why it's important is there are so many blind spots that you can't see. There's so much pain that you don't even realize is in your life. And you need somebody external to help you see the right path forward. And why on earth would you not take advantage of them knowing what that problem and solution is instead of wasting years or decades and suffering and money when they've already painted the picture because they've done the steps. They know they're just a few steps ahead of you. And so to me, it's like, why on earth wouldn't you want that? Like, it's crazy. It's insane to me not to take advantage of other people's learnings and lessons. That's why we have storytelling from decades and centuries ago. And so, of course, you need a mentor. You need a support system. That's what we're here for.
Of course we do. We all need it. I always like to remind people that every woman I know who is close to having developed or has developed a $100 million company has a minimum of one coach and one mentor, a bare bones minimum. They didn't get that.
I'd probably say they've got a huge community of people and shoulders to lean on, honestly. It takes a village.
It does. It does. I'm thinking of one woman in particular. She has her own personal board of directors of some of the most powerful women in business. And that's how we get there. I love your answer. Holly, would you be open to offering our listeners 3 actionable tips, 3 golden nuggets that they can take into their life and utilize now that will benefit them today, but that will also show them what an amazing coach or mentor you are, because we don't know how many women are listening today who are looking for someone like you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty broad question. So let's see. The first thing I would say is get clear on defining your compass. And what I mean by that is your life and business compass. What are your top 5 life priorities? And what does that look like when you're successfully aligned and living actionably in those life priorities? what are your 3 quarterly business goals, and set specific numbers and dates and deadlines for that. And then what's your big motivating factor 5 or 10 years from now? And then once you have that compass, start making decisions based on that compass. Like, have it as a screensaver on your computer, have it on your phone, share it with your family, share it with your coach, your mentor. The reason you do this is because you want to say yes to what's aligned to your compass that's going to get you 1% closer to your dream goal and your dream life, and say no to everything else. Because otherwise you're closing the door and backing yourself continuously into a corner of not having time and capacity for what matters. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I would say, get clear on what you want. And I know this sounds really general, but I can't tell you how many times I speak to people, whether it's networking, on my podcast, in conversation, clients who don't know what they want to be remembered for. They have no clear answer on what legacy they're building.
Yes.
And if you don't know what legacy you're building, what are you doing here? Like, what journey are you on? You have no road or path, and you can't build a blueprint for your life. And ultimately, you're probably building the wrong business if you're not clear on your compass, and you're not clear on the legacy you want to leave behind. And I can't tell you how many times I have clients that come to me, they're building the wrong business. It's completely out of alignment with what they want in their life. So we have to course correct. So that's the second thing. The third thing is, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, this is really resonating with me, but I'm scared. What are you waiting for? Who are you waiting for permission from? You are the only person that's ever going to give yourself permission. So lean into that, take action, because without action, absolutely nothing changes. And I don't want you to look a day from now, a week from now, a month from now, a year, 10 years from now with regret, because right now you're feeling this inner wisdom of, gosh, I need to do something different. I need to hire a coach. But that's uncomfortable. It's scary. I need to work with a mentor. I want to start a business, whatever that thing is. I would rather you be excited with some equal amount of fear and take action forward than sleepwalking like a zombie through this life. So take action. There you go.
Great tips. Great tips. And the whole fear thing about getting a mentor, getting a coach, I can only speak for myself. Fear's portable. It's not as if, as we're climbing the ladder, it just disappears. It's part of the journey. It's part of our internal signaling system. So I love the tips that you gave to these women. Now I have one I want to throw at you, because you are so expert in this field. Why not pick your brain a little bit? I was speaking with a potential client yesterday, and I'm sure you've heard this before. I have my answers, but I want to know what yours are. When you ask them, what is your financial goal for this year? This is a brand new business she just started. What do you hope to land at by the end of your first year to give you a launch point forward? And her answer was, as much as possible. I know you have to have heard of that before. Where do you go when that's the depth and the breadth of someone's vision?
Well, I mean, for me, I'd probably just say, okay, well, what does that mean to you? Like, what would be your bare minimum? What is your stretch goal? What would your holy mackerel goal be, to get specific? Because that's not a very clear answer when you say that.
Exactly.
And so I would just honestly just pull back the curtains layer, dig down, dig deep to get to the root of it. I do find that with women clients, we tend to, well, I wouldn't say myself anymore, but women clients tend to set smaller goals financially and in other ways. And it's hard to get out of that. And actually, I'm reading this book, just finished it, called Expectation Effect. So part of it's not a large part of this is not our fault. Like, it's societally how we've been raised. So we have these inner belief systems, but they are nonsense. And if you listen to Expectation Effect, you need to start just getting rid of this. So there's no difference between what we can contribute, what we can do financially between men and women. So we need to just get rid of that nonsense. We can't say women aren't good at money and women aren't good at business, because that's nonsense. We actually have a lot of skills to bring to the table. So I would just force this person to like actually give me a real answer. And then I'd say, okay, well, what if we added a 0 on that and see what they react? And they're usually like, whoa, wait a second. That's scary. Okay, well, why is that so scary? And then we get into like their actual mindset around money and the limitations they have with that, which will affect their sales conversation. And we go from there.
That's one of my favorite ways of addressing it is, let's see how it feels when we add a 0. Just 1. We'll start with 1. Thanks for that. Okay, now you're talking about money. I would love for you to speak to your revenue and performance consulting.
Yeah. So it's funny when I talk to people about what I do, they're like, that must be a really easy sales conversation. And I'm like, yeah, well, for people that are ready to take action and step up and invest in themselves 100%, it's an easy conversation. Because when I work with them, I intuitively, very quickly can find where they are leaving money on the table. And if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm not leaving money on the table, you are fooling yourself unless you're already working with somebody that can see your blind spots. People leave money on the table in a lot of different ways. They don't ask for the sale. They don't follow up on the sale. They don't have a system. They don't have like a dialed in employee experience. They are holding on to things that they should be outsourcing so they can really shine and step into their superpower in business. They have, not a dialed in customer experience. So they're losing customers and leads, which is insanity. Once you get them, let's keep them for life. And they're not utilizing their best shiny object ideas and turning those into profitable revenue streams. So when I come in, I work with them and we dial this in and make sure that we look at the metrics, the numbers, and bank on those success factors and stop leaving money on the table.
I know. I can just hear it. There's someone out there listening saying, what is a dialed in customer experience? They haven't gotten that far. So would you explain that for them?
Yeah, I mean, most people, when they start their business, they're just so focused on getting clients. They don't think about the onboarding experience. They don't think about the customer's journey. And the customer's journey begins when they're a prospect. They're just getting to know you online. They don't, they're not a warm lead or anything. So if you put yourself in the shoes of the customer, as soon as they purchase, they have buyer's remorse. It's a natural part of the human experience. It's like psychologically proven. They've got all kinds of studies on this. So when you make a big investment, yeah, you're excited, but you're also scared. And then as soon as you purchase it, you're like, oh, did I make a mistake? Ouch, that hurts. I'm not sure about this. Well, we don't want that. So if you dial in your customer experience, this is just one part of it. You want to position, a gift or a win for that client as soon as that buyer's remorse starts to kick in to get them back to excitement so that they love working with you. You want to delight your customer along their experience, and you want to have metrics to track this and ways to, check in on them to make sure that you keep them for life, and touch points to continuously reach out to this customer, whether you have a product or a service. Because ultimately what we're competing in this space for, because there's plenty of knowledge, plenty of services, plenty of products, is the experience and that connection between the client and the provider. And so if you're not really dialed in on this, you're going to lose to your competitors. You're going to lose customers, and your clients are going to, if you have a subscription, for example, if you find at 6 months in, people are leaving, there's a reason, and you want to fix that. So that's what I mean when I say dialing in your customer experience.
Thank you. And I really appreciate that you said, if you have a service, because I encounter so many women, just because that's my area, who don't understand that because they have a service, it is the same process. It is still the same process. So I really appreciate that you added that into your explanation. Tell us about your broadcast network. I'm very excited to hear more about what this is, and how you use this to connect with people and touch people.
Yeah, so the broadcast network is in partnership with my business partner, Phil Palucha, in the UK. and Alex Sanfilippo in Florida. Phil actually owns the network himself. It's called the Palucha TV, but we call it the broadcast network for our clients. Essentially, the broadcast network for our clients gives them exposure for their video streamed content to be distributed over satellite television to over 50 million homes in over 40 countries, and then repurpose their podcast content on the Billionaire and Boxers podcast, which is a top 5% rated podcast with over 1 million downloads a month. So, for example, my podcast, Inspiration Contagion, is on the broadcast network. So for our clients, they get instant international credibility overnight. Like, who is not going to say yes to being your guest when you have that kind of exposure, that kind of reach? Nobody. You can network with anybody in the world you want to have a conversation with, which is pretty incredible. So what we also do alongside that is we teach in a mastermind how to leverage that international credibility and visibility so that you can hit your revenue and impact goals in your business, your nonprofit, or your movement. And so it is the best of anything that Phil has done. And I love working with him. I was a client before a partner with him. And we have some pretty phenomenal thought leaders in our founders circle. And it has just been a delight seeing them accelerate their growth.
That's brilliant. And when we're through with the podcast, I want to speak with you about that.
Yeah, I was actually thinking as we got on here, I'm like, we have to talk about it.
I'm always signing up for coaching and mentoring and support and guidance because that's how we do it well. That's how we do it well. So talk to me about your podcast. Your podcast, you just mentioned your podcast. So let's tell our listeners about it.
Yeah, Inspiration Contagion is the name of my podcast and my book because I am a marketing expert, branding expert. So I was like, oh, let's do this intentionally and have some strategy. Essentially, I interview leaders across 5 different leadership profile styles, and we discuss challenges and setbacks that they've had, but how they remained inspired and resilient. And the reason I named it Inspiration Contagion was I came up with the idea at the beginning of the pandemic, and I noticed all of the negative news cycles, all of the stress, the fear, the anxiety, the darkness. And I was like, this is going to be a rough time in humanity, quite an experiment. And so I thought, what fights darkness? Light does, right? And so instead of spreading this virus and fear and darkness like a contagion, let's spread inspiration, light, and healing. So I came up with the idea of Inspiration Contagion, and my superpower in life and business is inspiring people. I just love helping light people up and just being like, you've got this. So I named it Inspiration Contagion for that reason. And I also used it to start collecting case studies and information for the books that I was going to be writing. So the first one I published last January, Inspiration Contagion, Health Secrets for Raving Success. It was a bestseller. I actually have a mastermind to help authors be bestsellers and actually leverage their book to make money as well from that experience. Because we left money on the table, you guys. We love like that. Yeah. Not because of me, but because I trusted the experts. And so Inspiration Contagion is not just a podcast, it's a movement. It represents what I want to do. It also represents the future nonprofit I want to start for children. And so it's really this bigger vision of let's share stories of inspiration and healing and love and light and how we can walk through that together and that you're not alone.
It's your legacy.
Yeah, it is.
And what a beautiful legacy it is. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, listeners, I'm going to do for you what I always do for you. Don't try to write while you're driving. Don't worry about the fact that you're jogging. I'm going to put all of Holly's information on the program notes. You'll be able to find every link that she wants to give me. You know, I pry as much information as I can out of the guests so that I can share it forward with you. And it will be there. So when you get home, when you have a moment, go to the website, the actual video, subscribe, share, and don't forget our 2023 tradition. Leave a comment. And as I always remind you, It doesn't have to be the most flattering comment ever. Leslie, did you not brush your hair after you got out of bed in the morning? Doesn't matter. What I want is to see more communication, more conversation. I want to see us engaging with each other. So, of course, we'll take your flattering comments if that's what you want to read, but it's not a requirement. Leave a comment. And if you leave a comment for Holly, I promise you, my team will get it over to her. So, subscribe, share, comment, and then the most important thing. Who do you know? What woman do you know who would deeply benefit from what Holly is sharing today? Be a good sister. Share it forward. It's not your responsibility to make sure she watched it. It is your responsibility to be a good sister and forward this podcast to her so that maybe she'll listen, maybe she'll watch, maybe she'll benefit. So, Holly, thank you for being on today. And before we wrap up, I want to ask you, what is the one thing I did not ask you that you most want to share with the listeners today?
That's a really broad question, Leslie.
Yes, I would give you an open arena.
Let's see. I would say your message matters. And the reason I say that is a couple of things. One, I have a networking monthly event called Your Message Matters. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, every month I do a meeting on that. And I say this to women specifically because I think we forget that we too have a message to share with the world. And sometimes we, based on, societal expectations or beliefs or limitations, we kind of sit back. And I know, especially women at the conference room, at the table, are shy from raising their hand and sharing their ideas. So I would just say your message matters, whether it's writing a book, writing a blog, getting up on a stage, doing a video, sharing something with a friend, commenting on the show. Share your message because it does matter and it does make a difference. And then I would encourage you to add a comment on one thing you learned from today that you're going to take action on. So you have a specific direction on what we want to hear from you. So I'd love to hear what you're going to do today to grow 1% closer to what you want.
Thank you. See, that's why I give my guests an open arena at the end so that they can share whatever they want. So thank you very much for that. And listeners, thank you for tuning in again today. Now, Holly mentioned, what's the one thing you got that's going to move you 1% closer? Now, we have a tradition for those of you who are new here. I always invite all of you to write down the golden nuggets that you got from this conversation. We all get golden nuggets all the time. We go on. The next day we wonder, what was that? What was that? What was that? When you get off of here, write down the golden nuggets that you received, all on different pieces of paper. And then just toss them somewhere. Toss them on your messy desk. Toss them on your bar. Toss them on your table with all the bills. And what will happen is this will come back to you as a gift that you gave your future self. 2 days ahead, a week later, and you'll have that moment to sit down and ask yourself, why did I write this down? You'll bring that golden nugget back to you. And you'll be able to remind yourself that your message does matter, because be sure and put that one on one of the papers, and then leave a comment for Holly on how you're going to move 1% closer to your goal based on the beautiful wisdom she shared today. Have a wonderful day going forward. And I just want to remind you, you truly are stronger and wiser than you know.